Hey, so welcome to my office. It's such a pleasure to be able to do a tour, and I'm delighted and grateful that somebody wants to see it. Just a place where we are. We're in downtown Zurich in a beautiful, beautiful old villa that I feel so lucky to have been able to come. And first I was a subletter, and now I rent the whole floor from a family. And as I love explaining, this building is owned by a family. And has been owned by a family through generations, and we rent from the family. Such a building in downtown London, Paris, New York, it would be very difficult to keep in a family because of inheritance taxes, and because Zurich doesn't have any inheritance taxes. The ownership of this building goes back to a family called the Weber family, many hundreds of years. And what would have happened in a place like London or New York is that they would have had to pay inheritance taxes, and that would have been expensive. The building would have had to be sold, probably to an insurance company or some other financial institution, and that would have changed the social structure of the area. And what you have here is many people who own particular buildings, and it means that Zurich has maintained that kind of village atmosphere despite being a world city. And what's happened in places like downtown Manhattan or in London, for example, in the city of London, is that you don't have any private ownership of property anymore. So that social structure has disappeared. But maybe I can take you down to our library, which is the first place, and we'll come back to this corridor.
That would be great.
Actually, we can see here a statue of Charlie Munger. And I've owned this statue ever since Monish Pabrai had somebody in India strike a bunch of them. And I ended up buying, I think, 6 or maybe 5. And I ended up keeping 2. So there's one in my home. And maybe someday we can do a tour of my home office. I have a lovely home office that I'm really proud of as well. Florence and the Uffizi galleries, which I urge anybody to go and visit. You can see amazing busts of Roman generals and people. We were talking earlier about Marcus Aurelius. And I realized in walking those galleries that those were not kind of artworks as they were inspirational works. There's evidence from the psychology departments that if you take a common area where you have an honor system for buying drinks, paying for the coffee that you're drinking, if you just put an image of a set of eyes, then people comply more. And just the image of seeing 2 eyes, oh, I'm being observed. And so, it's deliberate. Charlie Munger's here. Charlie Munger's here to observe everything that we do. And it's a reminder of what I'm aspiring to. And I think that what I've experienced in offices is that the people who care to make successful of themselves use as many devices as they can, and to use an inspirational figure and to bring, Charlie Munger says, that you can always hang out with the eminent dead. That's the great, the late Charlie Munger, the late and great Charlie Munger is now the eminent dead. We can still hang with him. And it's not beneath Warren Buffett to use devices like having a statue, or Warren Buffett has many things in his office to help him focus his mind on where he wants to be. One of the things he has in his office, which actually I don't have here, is a poster that says, "Be a great investor today," or "Invest like a champ today." And he has it underneath a door arch like this, which is kind of really cool. And actually one of the great benefits of bidding on and winning this charity launch with Warren Buffett all those years ago was that we got invited to his office, and I saw that he had something like that up. And so I think before that I would have thought, well, having devices like that is kind of tacky. If you're great, you don't need help. And what I learned is even the world's greatest investors and the greatest at anything need all the help that they can get. So I think what I want to do now, unless there are any questions about this wonderful Charlie Munger bust, is to go into my library before I go into my office, although we could do a sneak peek at my office just from the outside before we go to the library, and maybe we can do that.
That'd be perfect.
So let's just go to my office, and so this is where I spend most of my time, and we'll go into it later, but this is where I actually do work, and we'll talk more about it. And it's not perfect, it's a work in progress, but let me take you into my library, which is where, when I first rented this space, I used to spend quite a lot of time. And what I found was, well, let's go inside and then I'll show you. So I deliberately wanted to have this room as a room without any devices, and where I wouldn't even bring a device in. I made a compromise at one point and put in a sonic speaker, and it does have Wi-Fi. But I found that every time I forced myself to come into this room and sit here and either read or think or look at the books or take books out, my thinking would improve. And so I kind of like really, really value this room. And there's something that makes me very happy just to be surrounded by books. I do want to say something about the vast number of books that are here. And there are approximately 5,000 books in the library, in the combined whole office. So people say, well, have you read all these books? And so that's the first point that I want to make really, really clearly. And I'm inspired by, I believe it's Umberto Eco, who can be seen in photographs in a huge library, and he called it his anti-library. So my way of seeing things is, if I've read a book, the only reason why I'd keep it around is if I want to reference it or if I want to read it again. But the books that I haven't read are a reminder of how much there is out there for me still to learn and to read and to understand. And I kind of treat, in a way, every book is, so I consider a library a bit like a cocktail party. So I can, well, we can go into the specific books, but I can open a book on so many different topics, and somebody who's written a book far more than a research report or an annual report for a company has spent, my book took 5 years to write. Sometimes they spend more, 10 years to write the book. The amount of human effort that's gone into that book, the amount of distillation, I can have the product of that work here with me, and I can flick it open and take a look. And that's what a cocktail party conversation is. And then you go to a cocktail party, a mixer, some people call them, and you can decide who you want to become friends with and who you want to have a second meeting with. And so there is a benefit to having books available to pull and to look at quickly and just flick through and see what's there. And I do read a Kindle, and I have many, many books on a Kindle. And actually, I think the Goodreads does a pretty good job of showing what I'm reading on the Kindle, and people are welcome to look. But there's something about having the physical book, and maybe it's just my generation, but being able to flick through the pages, getting a sense, reading some random pages, see where it's going. So this is what this is. No, I have not read every single book here. I have touched every single book, and I've flicked through. I've looked at it. It's not just I ordered rows of books. And reading anything online, when I hear of a book, when I'm reading in a book and somebody references a book, anything that catches my eye, I go and add usually to my Amazon wish list. And then actually, if I'm really curious to read it, I might also get the sample copy in Kindle. And if it's really urgent, I feel it's really urgent for me to read it, I'll download the book and order the physical copy of the book. And so every book represents an element of curiosity for me, or an element, something where I came across something where I said, I want to know more about this. I want to find out what's written about this subject. So, and it's kind of, in a way, overwhelming, because there's no way that I could read through all of these books, even if I spent 5 years. As I acquired more books, and I just decided, you know what, my life is better the more books I have, so I'm not going to worry about spending money on books. And there's something that I heard somewhere, I don't remember where, we always had something with our children where we said, any book you want to buy, you can automatically get it. Any toy, we'll look and see. We're not sure we want to get you any toy, but a book, doesn't matter what the content of the book is available in your hands. We'll always spend money on books. So we got to an issue because there were so many books around, and we were starting to have discussions about how to file them. And it's only recently, over the last year and a half, that the books have been catalogued in, and we had to choose. I did some research. I learned a little bit about cataloging systems. In the English language, there are two major catalog systems. One is the Dewey catalog system, and the other is Library of Congress. And we picked Library of Congress. So it was slightly painful for me at first, but that I would group books in a way that made sense to me, and in order of when I'd acquired them, where I wanted to read them, and they kind of developed their own sense. But at some point I realized that wasn't working because I couldn't find books anymore. And so now the Library of Congress catalog basically assigns to every book that's published a unique catalog number. And once the book has that unique catalog number, it has basically a place on shelves, and there's an order to them. And it goes from the A's all the way to the Z's, and with letters as well. And so the books here are arranged according to the Library of Congress catalog. And actually, we use a very simple and free cataloging system called Library Thing. And so not all the books are cataloged, and I keep buying more books. And some of them are at home, and some of them are in clusters. But eventually, and we're getting through it, they will all get a catalog number. And so I can find them, and it actually works pretty well. And anybody can go look at my catalog online. Like I said, it doesn't have all the books, but you can find out what books I have, basically.
I see a wide range of subjects varying, and I'm curious how all of these different subjects help you form insights.
A book, so I'll tell you something else that I feel is really important. Having written a book, there's a lot of work that goes into the design of a book. And, they say, don't judge a book by its cover. And ever since books went into Kindle, the design language changed to be able to make the book visible in thumbnails, which is something that I know some YouTubers like Jeremy Stickney, who's one of the best YouTubers on the planet, know way more about than I do. But and I'm getting to your point about the subject of the book. It's not so we know from learning that if you want to be the best, do your best performance in an exam, try and practice taking the exam in exam conditions. And that can come down to the exact nature of the room, the nature of the lighting, the nature of the sounds. And because those help you to remember, they help you to perform. And so if I flick through a book, the ideas contained in that book become associated with the book, the design of the book, the cover, the nature of the pages. And so when I strongly believe if we were to just look down a row of books as we're doing right now, what will stick out to you is not what will stick out to me, because I will notice something, and I strongly believe that whatever it is that sticks out to me is something, trust my instinct. So as I look at this, in fact, funny enough, one of the books that comes out to me, so this is, HD, I don't know what this is, politics maybe. I need to look at the catalog to actually know. And, it Paths to Power, How Outsiders Shaped American Business Leadership. I mean, I guess, if you take this book, it's pretty obvious why that would be interesting to me. And I would have read about it somewhere. And, well, Nitin Noria, I don't know exactly why I wanted to buy this book. It may have just have been Nitin Noria, who was the dean of Harvard Business School for a while. But of course, that's interesting to anybody who's interested in investing. So there's one that just comes out like that. And then a second one that caught my eye is down there, and it's the Alan Greenspan book. And, why would you not want to know about what Alan Greenspan used to say about the map and the territory? I mean, he may have been one of the United States' most influential central bankers, an unbelievably brilliant guy who dated for a while the author of another amazing book, and her name just escapes me, but she was the Ayn Rand. He dated Ayn Rand. She was the author of, and kind of like an allegory for life in America, and an allegory for the Road to Self-Development by Hayek, and how the swamp is what you would say now, is kind of like smothering creativity and innovation in the American economy. And he dated Ayn Rand. So again, I would have bought this book probably at the time that Alan Greenspan was a newsmaker. I can't say that I've read it, but one thing that in a way I have a regret over, and is a difficulty for me, is that I would love to just spend more time in here and more time reading things like this book, if you like. I would also say that something that's really important about books is like who's talked to you about them. So if somebody talks to me about a book, that book is now associated with them in my mind. And so probably now I'm associated with Alan Greenspan, interestingly enough. So, but I mean, the books are not here just to sort of like satisfy my curiosity and desire to know about investing. They're here, and I'll come out 2 more to talk about. We can do as much, or 3 more actually, why not? They're here to satisfy my curiosity, period. And so in my ideal world, so I've flicked through this, but there's a Cambridge approach to history, and this is an economic history of the United Kingdom. And I think that reading such books gives me a perspective on how industries and economies and societies develop. And anybody who's interested in industry, anybody who's interested in commerce, would want to study the UK was where the Industrial Revolution first happened, and it was it's probably, I'm not sure I can say this, but more economic history has been written about in UK than elsewhere. And so I would have got this, but I just thought, wow, I just want to have that. I want to have it here for reference. I want to be able to look at it. Anybody who grew up in the UK would have known about Alan Sugar. And business biographies is an interesting genre. It's a flawed genre, especially when it's an autobiography. And I think I write about it a little bit because most people tell, there are things that they leave out. But there are all sorts of reasons why reading about, say, Alan Sugar. So it's not just about curiosity about his own life that I'm interested in. It's that anybody in the UK who knows who Alan Sugar is will appreciate me bringing up elements of his life to them. And if they were to visit this library, they'd be like, oh my God, you've got a book on Alan Sugar, that's so interesting. So there's also that element to it. So, you kind of see that there's like a rich knowledge and contextual knowledge. And in a way, what have we learned from mobile phone data? It's not the content of the conversations necessarily that count. It's the metadata, they call it. And there's so much around books, which is the metadata around the books, So, again, why would you not want to know what is in this book, and to know what David Landis thinks, and perhaps to be able to quote him? And what I would say right now is that there's a certain frustration that I have because I just don't have enough time. I've flicked through this book. I've seen bits of it, but I'd like to have read this thoroughly and fully. And now what I'm going to do is what one would do in a library is I'm going to put these back because I don't know where I pulled them out from, and I don't want to try and put them back in the right place. I'm going to leave them to be shelved in the appropriate way, which is what you do in a library, which is just so interesting. But so, yeah, and it just goes on, and it's kind of fascinating to do this because, I mean, there are other books like this one. Dory Clark is a friend. She was one of the first people who interviewed me about my book. And she talked about how to play the long game in life. And it's a lovely book. And I think I did a podcast with her. I loved it. And she herself is kind of a heroine in her own right. And so, some of them are books by friends or where I booked a podcast with a person. And every now and then I will cut a book. So I'll just be like, what, this is annoying me. I don't want to look at it anymore. I'm kind of done with this. And, well, there's some heroes over here. We're in a sort of biography section over here. And I'm sure that many people watching this video will know about Sir Ernest Shackleton. And so there's like just a bunch of Shackleton stories here. Why would one not want to know those stories? It's just the most amazing inspirational story. 2 seconds on Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton decided that he wanted to be the first guy to reach the South Pole. He was in competition with this guy Amundsen. He goes down with a bunch of British guys to the whaling station in South Georgia Island, puts together his ship, and ignores the advice of the whaling station captain or head of the whaling station, who's a Norwegian guy, who says, you don't want to go south right now, the sea's going to freeze up. He ends up deciding to ignore the advice, going south, never makes it to land. Ship gets stuck in the middle of the sea, ends up spending more than 12 months with his men in a shipwreck on ice. Long story short, manages to save every single man's life. And one of the reasons why Shackleton is, I would have a statue of him, and I've actually made the effort to go visit the James Caird boat in Dulwich College in South London. Why? Because the guy didn't achieve it. He didn't reach the South Pole. After his attempt, I think it was Amundsen, I don't know the history there, reached the South Pole, so he didn't make it. But I think that in terms of Antarctic explorers, Shackleton is the most remembered and the most revered because he saved all of his men. And it's kind of like a beautiful reminder that in the worst tragedies and the worst investment mistakes, remember Shackleton. Shackleton on his boat, he had people, so the boat was supposed to deliver the group that was going to then go to the South Pole. And on the boat were people who were just there as taxi drives to deliver them and go back. Like one guy was the ship's carpenter, and he had no intention of ever turning on dry land. Now this guy's stuck on this boat, and Shackleton had to have the leadership qualities to be able to keep this guy motivated to stay alive. And at one point, this guy, the carpenter, was in a deep relationship with the dogs. They ended up having to eat the dogs because they were running out of food. Then they moved on to eating penguins. But he had to have the leadership quality to bring his team with him, as they knew that he'd, in a way, led them out in the most horrible mistake, and they might all perish, and they didn't. It's an incredible story. There's some great movies about it as well. And so, I can talk for hours about that. There's biographies of Nelson Mandela here. There's Mahatma Gandhi. This book here was an inspiration for my book. It was the first meal that I had with Monish Pabrai that he talked to me about this book. And I bought it because I'd already started buying books. It wasn't this copy of the book. And I had it on my bookshelf at home in New York. And then again, this is the kind of, for me, the tactile element of books, physical books. Not to say that one shouldn't use a Kindle. I use a Kindle. And then one day, that book is looking at me and saying, pick me up. That's not going to happen. That serendipity is not going to happen if you don't have your anti-library with you. And I read the book in like 3 days. It just blew me away. And in a way, the book, when I was ready, the book stuck out at me. And so I'd flick through it. Obviously, when it arrived, I flicked through it, I took a look, I put it on the shelf. Allowing for that serendipity to happen, I think, is really, really valuable, which is what happens when you have a library. And, in a way, what just blew me away, and I don't know now that I want to do it live, but, I've said this elsewhere, he talks about spending time with prostitutes. That's authentic, man. When you can talk about, and you're kind of revealing your soul, and that would be something that I can only imagine most men would be highly ashamed to talk about. They'd want to leave that out. If you take, I don't know about Alan Sugar, if you take that biography, you probably leave that stuff out. Here's a guy saying that, and huge inspiration for me in writing my book was this, because I said, if Mahatma Gandhi can do it, I can do it. I'm going to be authentic with the reader, a story of my experimentations with the truth. Another thing that comes up to me as I say that is that Jordan Peterson has said, if you want an adventure, tell the truth. It's quite incredible. And in a way, the story of my life could be told. There was the period before I wrote my book. Then I read this by Mahatma Gandhi. I was inspired to tell the truth. I told the truth, and I've been on an adventure ever since. And so, yeah, I think that, again, and I've already said this, but what I find frustrating is that as I look through these, I want to have read more of them, and there's just not enough time. This book, written by it's an autobiography, but it's by the father of a very good friend of mine, Ken Schubensheim. And so it really is my book collection, my library, not anybody else's library. Now, this is one that these two, and I don't fully understand why I ended up reading them, but if you were to ask me who was my favorite American president, not that I've done a study of all of them, but the story of Abraham Lincoln is really quite incredible. I mean, he passed up the opportunity to run for president and other offices multiple times because he always gave the opportunity to the other guy. And he only ended up running for president when he was the last guy standing. It was the only choice around. And he kind of held on to himself. He held on to his ego and he said, no, you go. And just like the wisdom of that man was just through the roof. And he led America during an extraordinarily difficult time. And it's funny because one of the things that comes up for me is Abraham Lincoln was, in a way, he was willing to tolerate a country in which there was slave ownership, although it didn't appeal to him himself, and he didn't want to be a slave owner. But he knew that it was unjust, and knew he wanted to lead the country to end slavery. But the choice of when to issue the Emancipation Proclamation taught me so much about the actual difficulties of being a politician. I have conversations with my father, and he says, that XYZ politician's a total idiot. And then what I tell him is, I know that you and I disagree vehemently with his politics. He was talking about Barack Obama at the time. I said, don't ever think these people are stupid. They're not stupid. You cannot understand. We cannot understand what it's like to be in their shoes. So the key point for Abraham Lincoln, he knew he wanted to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. He had people pressuring him, Yankees from North, saying, issue it now. But he was trying to balance a number of different things. And he waited quite a long time, longer than anybody else would have. But there were dangers to issuing it too early. It would have perhaps split the country worse, but it made it more difficult to reconcile with the South. Interesting story. So a couple of photographs of my family up there. It's always good to have photos of the family. And in a way, this is not different to Charlie Munger outside. In a way, these are some of the people I'm working for. I mean, in a way, we all work to put food on the table. And I feel like there's huge moral power in being dedicated to one's family. Gives meaning to our life, all those good things. The photo on the left is a photograph taken on Pilatus shortly after we'd arrived in Zurich. And the photo on the right is the day that I lost my wedding ring. That's in Plasters. It was the first day that we skied together as a family. And it was such a joyous occasion for all of us to be skiing together, and so freaking cool. And it was a warmish day, and so I was skiing without gloves, and of course your hands shriek, and so the ring fell off. So I feel like if you're going to lose your wedding ring, then that's a day to lose the wedding ring. And then there's another portrait. I don't know where that portrait of Charlie Munger comes up, but it's there, and it's it never hurts to have too many. You can't have too many portraits of Charlie Munger. And what do we have here? I've read some of Ronald Charnock's works. He's an incredible historian, incredible detailed studies of some pretty important people. This one is let me get you wrong, John D. Rockefeller. I didn't want to. This is the husband of somebody who. I had this amazing professor for Peter Sinclair, who unfortunately died of COVID. He's, we all have one or two, for me it's two, I can remember, teachers who changed everything for me, and Peter Sinclair changed everything for me. This is the husband of one of his other students, Rory Cullen Jones, and I have not read this, but I felt like, why did I want to have it? Because I'm a huge fan of Diane Coyle. She's a professor at Cambridge and is an extremely senior advisor to the UK government on many topics, including on media and the BBC and licenses. And she has a wonderful relationship with her husband. They have a dog. And so it's kind of like, I have another rule, interestingly enough. I'm going to put another book here that I've just noticed. So if I meet somebody that's written a book, I don't think it's fair for me to try and take their time or to ask them to give me their time if I've not read what they've written. So I'm asking them potentially to tell me what's in the book. And having written a book, the blood, not actual blood. Writing's easy. Just stare at a blank page of paper and watch blood clots form. It takes a lot of work. So it's a mark of respect for somebody's effort to write a book, to read the book before one engages with them in real life. And the engagement will be far, far richer if one's read the book. This is not the only book by Suzanne Haywood, but Suzanne so her late husband was Jeremy Haywood. She has an incredible story, which I'll tell small parts of in a second, but one of my investments is a company called Exor. Exor controls Ferrari, Stellantis, now controls Philips, amongst other things. And I go regularly to the Exor annual meeting. They have a biannual meeting in Turin. And Susan Haywood is, in a way, is John Elkins. I don't think I'm misstating it to say that she's his COO. She's also probably the chairman, the vice chairman of a number of the holding companies. And so I met her at the meeting, and of course I went and bought her books. If I meet somebody, so in this library, anybody that I met who's written a book, it's extremely likely that I'll have a copy of that book here. And Suzanne grew up on a boat. Her parents had the dream of sailing around the world. And for her, it was an abusive childhood. She didn't want to sail around the world. It was her parents' dream. It wasn't her dream. And this is the story of how she survived that. And it's an interesting thing for parents that have forced your children to live your dreams. So I could go on, as you can see, for hours and hours, but I'm going to keep walking through and show you. I think that what I want to do is go to the place where I actually do my work. Perfect, like place to be.
Yep.
And I have a drive-through, so I'm going to try and get some Coca-Cola on the way. Those are blasted mine in these disappeared. So let's go into the office. Maybe there's some more to know. Yeah, there is some more to that, so we're good. So, do you want me to follow you? And so here's my walk then. This is about the same degree of tidy. No, this is like more tidy than it would normally be because I've just come back. And so the setup in here for me is really, really important and valuable and helpful for me. And so I want to talk you through it, if that's okay. And but why don't I just do some photographs first, because those are kind of fun. So we have a photograph of my family here. This was the first set of maybe professional photos that we took with my family, and it was an enormous amount of fun. A very well-known photographer in London called Paolo Hansen, and he's extremely talented at what he does. And then before I go to the actual work arrangement, I mean, who doesn't want to? If this is framed, why wouldn't it be framed? It's less from Warren Buffett. 2017, dear guy, you've written a terrific annual report. One of the best I've seen. Congratulations on both your communications and the results over the years. You must have some very happy partners. Best regards, Warren. It's like, you can imagine what happened to me when I received that. I was kind of like, you had to peel me off the floor. And I've said this in other places, but I can say it again and again. Who thought that would happen just from having lunch with Warren? And he doesn't have to do that. And he certainly didn't obligate himself to do that. What a gift he gave me. And, he showed up to that lunch, I've said before, determined to deliver value. when you consider that combined Moj Pabrai and I paid $650,000 or so to have lunch with him, made a donation to a charity to have lunch with him, he's delivered way, way more value than that. And that's just one. And then, and here are a couple of other holiday cards. I don't get holiday cards from him every year. I feel very grateful when I do. And there's something very interesting going on here. So this is, the other side of this doesn't have anything on it. And so he sends this like this. And here's written, "Hi, Guy. Thanks for the goodie. So I'd have sent him chocolates or something. Your annual report was great, Warren." So he likes my annual report. And then he's got Warren there and it says, my body is a temple, angel and crumbling. Happy holidays, Warren. There's some things here which just make me realize how much Warren understands. So he knows that he doesn't ask us to. I don't know how big his list is, but he knows that there are a couple of things that will make the card special. One is that it's personalized, because then it's not something that somebody gave me. It was written and it's got to say my name on it. And that's actually something that I don't do with my holiday card. It's worth thinking about, maybe I should change that. And he knows that people will put it up as a brag thing. And so that's good for me. He's giving a gift to me, which is invaluable in a way. But it's also good for him, because I'm talking about Warren Buffett, and I sort of discovered, and I've copied that in some ways, where people say, "Oh, look, I've got your card up, I've got your something up." And I think, wow, that's kind of like, in a way, a reminder that I exist, is kind of subtle marketing. So there's one of them. And of course, you can see I put them up like this. And here's another one. So this is from 2023. So this is the last one. People they act like they want me for my money, but I know they want me for my body. It says, "My money, my body," just theirs. Norritus and I just, "Thank you for remembering me during the holidays. Many wishes." So again, why would I not have this up here? I'll just show you a few more of my, and I'm just going to, so this is I'll come to this in a second. This is my work desk. Well, this is my computer desk over here with this. So this is behind me. And this is the first one I received from Warren. Again, same idea. These are my parents. Always good to have your parents up. Again, these are people that I want to have. I used to have more photos of my investors, and I don't know where they went. So there may be reasons for that. This is just for a reason. I'm a huge fan of Barry Weiss, and I happened to fill this out, and so I just kept it here. Friends and family, my daughters. This is this professor piece there that I talked about, and that's him in my graduation from Oxford all those years ago. And I'm so sorry he's not around. I remember him fondly. And there are photographs from ValueX, an amazing videographer and a YouTuber called Jeremy Stickling is one of the members of the ValueX community. That's too high for me to reach. So now I think that what I want to do after taking a sip of water, which is somewhere, is just walk you through what I figured out for my workflow here. And I can't see the glass. I'm just going to sip from the bottle. It's okay. So I have ADHD, but the world is ADHD. The computer is at once the most incredible and useful tool. And at the same time, it's an incredible distraction device. On the computer, there is, I experimented with not having Bloomberg monitor on there. So there's a Bloomberg monitor, not to mention access to everything. YouTube, Twitter, social media, whatever the hell I want. And so what I figured out was, so what I used to do was I'd walk in front of the computer, try and go to the library. But there are also times when you just need to write, And so what I realized was to have two desks facing each other. One is a clean work surface with no access to IT, and the screens and the glittering of the screens can distract me. So that area is an area where I can read and work without, it's close to the computer, but not on the computer. And then there's a computer over here. Was something that was extremely liberating for me and empowering for me. And it does mean that I spend less time and the library than I would like to. And often now, as you can see, there's a chair over there. I go and sit in that chair when I have something to read, to be away from the desk. So I like working with printouts. I like reading stuff, and there's a reason for that I will share. And I do accept and understand and realize that I did not grow up in the generation that studied at school with an iPad or similar. But I think there's a power to paper which people don't realize, which I will get into. On these shelves here, I would just say that what you saw in the original library is a brand called USM. It's a Swiss brand, of course. It's amazing modular furniture, very high quality modular furniture that I first saw at the offices of Swiss Re in New York, and also at the offices of Print Swiss that used to use it. And again, for me, it disappears. I know that some people don't like it, but that's USM, and it's modular, so it can be moved around if one wants. I realize there's some photographs that I didn't talk you through. Some of my investors and some more. So another one from note from Warren. That this is. I discovered then that after that, I discovered that for bookshelves, I really, really love this. This is a company called Vitsoe. It's actually a Scandinavian brand, and I love the bookshelves, and it's also modular. And this continues the library, so there's plenty of books there. And if I'm asked, I will talk about the books that are in these particular shelves. But I talk for hours about those books. Maybe it's too much. But so these piles are meaningful, and what I want to share, and I've discovered works well for me, and I think has accelerated my capacity to learn, and also has increased my capacity to go deep on topics. So the challenge is what to read now, So we've talked about books and how you want to have, I believe, I want to have an anti-library, touch the books, look at them, click through them when they arrive. And then, when it catches your eye, maybe that's the one I need to read right now. What about annual reports? What about research reports? What about 10Ks and Qs? What about all the other materials that one might receive? And so I have a kind of a triage system. So when something gets printed out, so here's something that got printed out recently that is not related to investing. It's actually related to a political interest of mine. It's a Palestine Royal Commission. So this is kind of like this area. Here's my inbox, and then this area here. If I move around, I'm going to come this way to over there. If you stay over here, so this continues to be my inbox. So here's some stuff that I just recently printed out. So this is a company called Virtue Motors. It's a British company that I want to learn more about. So I printed out their annual report. So I'll get to what. So there's an application of space recognition repetition here. I'm an investor in India Energy Exchange, so I'm interested in all things energy. So here's a book called The Economics of Electricity. So and here's something printed by the Federal Regulatory Commission in the U.S., Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, that I have not read. That it's just a primer on energy, lots of good stuff here. So I'm sitting here, and so I want to read this stuff, and I will pick stuff up and I'll read it. And now the question is, I've certainly not learned enough about energy. I've not learned enough about all sorts of things. I haven't been at the office, so a lot of it will go in the bin once I've read it. But I might keep something behind, where I might make notes on a piece of paper that remind me of something. And if it's an annual report, I might tear the annual report, the relevant parts of the annual report out. So this is the annual report of Morningstar for 2023. I haven't yet read it, but I might keep 2 or 3 pages. And what I'm doing once I've read it is just go over there to that side. That now, I have a rule that I don't want to just read. I want to engage with the world. So when I've read this energy primer, I will pick up, and so there'll be references at the back, for example. There may well be an introduction at the front. I will pick up at least one or two names out of this and may well write to them, probably write to them. And in this case, it kind of feels to me that this is an exception. It's been written anonymously by the firm. So in this case, I can't lift a name straight from the document, but I might try and find out who wrote this. If you take this, Economics of Electricity, Cambridge University Press, Anna Creti, Fulvio Fontini. Once I've read it, I'll want to write to these people, at least one of them, and say, hey, I read your book, thank you so much. And I've now been told by somebody turning out to be an incredible friend that when I've read a book, I need to do a short video review of it as well. So I ought to do that as well. And so I will, for example, make notes on the book on this piece of paper, and I'll put it for processing on that side, because often I will write to them by email. And so there's action to be taken, and once or they'll get entered into the database, I'll take that action, and then I'll throw the piece of paper away. But the piece of paper serves as a reminder that I still need to take action on this. So as I read through this book, I'll throw bits of it into the garbage. I'll make notes maybe here. And eventually there's something that happens related to that book. And the important other thing here is that, Tiago Forte, who's in this, so I'm kind of talking about the area of knowledge management. And so one of the ideas is spaced repetition. The idea is that when I'm learning somebody's name, I need to repeat it often at first, but then over time, as it gets worked into the wiring of my brain, however that neuroscience works, I don't have to repeat it as often. And so there'll be concepts in here and ideas, whereas I'm reading it, and also the pressure of having to work and pressure of other things, I don't have the time to fully commit it, to fully understand it, to fully absorb the ideas in the moment. So I want to save it for my future self. And so how do I create a system where my future self will come across this document again? And what we have, and I'll show in a second, but it's actually on the other side. So it's not labeled, but the piles work their way in this. And so if I can just go around to the side. So let's say I've read this and I've thrown some bits in the bin, but some bits I don't have time for. I'll go here. And eventually from here, the bits that I need to take action on will end up here. And I'll take action on my computer behind my desk over here. And then some of them, I'll say, my God, I don't have time for this right now. I got to go home for dinner. I got whatever is going on. And so I will put it into, so the way these piles work is, and sometimes there's 4 here. If it's so it's sometime soon now. So the things that I want to review sooner will go into either this pile or that pile. And this is these piles are a little larger than they ought to be because I just traveled away. And so if I come into the office and what I would likely do is I would take this pile, for example, forgive me, and it goes into the inbox over there. So this is stuff that has already been through my hands once. Now, if it's for the long-term future, so sometime means in the next few months, this is in the next few weeks, this is in the next few days, so I'll take the pile of stuff that has been saved for later, and I will triage it approximately into sometime soon now. And so when I take this pile away, this will move over. So this kind of paper's filtering through, and things are coming up for me again, so I'm not living in a state of angst where I remember to look at this again. And that's a physical representation of spaced repetition, effectively. And I have similar systems that are working in Evernote. So I use Evernote. I was using my God, it's so long since I used it, I don't even remember its name. But it's a hyperlink type thing, which I actually don't think is working very well for me. And now a whole bunch of my knowledge is in there and I don't know how to take it out, but that's a whole story. So this is not just in the physical world, it's replicated in the digital world. And those two worlds kind of interact. They don't entirely match, but they're kind of like, and you can imagine if I'm writing to somebody who appeared in this report, now they're going into that physical world, the digital world. And so if it's in the digital world, I'll continue the digital world until I find the desire to move around. So there's a kind of, and it literally, this sort of circulation around, sort of like spending my days walking around my desk in a clockwise fashion. Something for me that's very important for all people with ADHD. ADHD is, I need the time in front of me at all times. And so the office was set up differently before, and when we moved it around, I just insisted I was used to seeing a clock here, so there's a clock here, and there's a clock on the desk. I need to be reminded of the time at all times, and something that I now have at home that actually works incredibly well is, they call it Pomodoro timer. So if there's something I want to do, I've got a few of them now around. I don't have one here. Set it for 10 minutes and do that thing for 10 minutes. And it's amazing. There's something about knowing I don't have to worry about when I'm going to finish because the alarm will go off and then I can finish and I can fully commit myself to the focus on that task is had a really powerful. So these two piles, they just work. It's two flows on both sides working their way in this way. And, I don't know why the Jeffries report is here. It is here, but this is the Jeffries and Company annual report. And the way it is, I haven't read it. And so another aspect of this spaced repetition now sometime soon is, so what's going on here? Sometimes I'll look at a company, I'll do some research, and I'll decide that I want to follow it and I want to be reminded of it. So, there's a zillion different alerts that one can set up on Bloomberg. But as you can see, I like operating in the physical world. And somehow, so this is something that, so at some point, Warren Buffett said that he bought 100 shares of every company in the S&P, I believe. So Monish said it to me. He said, like, I'm not rich like Warren, so I'm not going to do 100 shares, I'll do one share. And so the modification is I do a few shares of the company in a Charles Schwab account. And Charles Schwab keeps saying, would you like electronic delivery? Hoping I'll see it. I'm like, no, I want physical delivery. I'm actually buying the shares in order to get the annual reports. And so every year, a whole slew of companies are sending their annual reports to me. And I will, here's one is Pool Corporation. And this one was mentioned to me by the guy called, it's written in here, Borislav Koev. He works at the company, he follows me, he said, you got to look at this company, it's really great. And I had a lovely conversation with him. And my answer was, Borislav, you're wonderful business, but you're a black box. And I can understand why it works. But so this actually shouldn't probably be there. So here's an example. I think that I want to read this and get rid of it. So I'm going to put it in this file, which is to go through quite soon. Pool Corp, I'm actually interested in reading this. So this is a really fascinating business. It's been a growth business for a very long time, for a very high valuation. And so when I go traveling, or when I have a long train ride, I'll grab a bunch of these and read them. And it's just really valuable to have them. I learn a lot from them. So that again is a way of, so I read about a company every now and then. I'll go into the Charles Schwab and I'll buy a share. I'll just hit an order, buy a share, 5 shares, whatever it is, just so I can get the annual report. And every now and then I will say, okay, I really don't want to follow this company anymore. I'm going to stop owning the shares. So I'll sell the shares that I'm not buying the shares for an investment in a way. I'm buying it as a way of tracking the companies. Last thing here, I do usually the notebooks names. They're in different formats. This is slightly slidey, I wish it wasn't. For some reason I found myself wanting to pull these on out. There we go. I give them each a specific name, and the style with which I write notes in these changes. Sometimes I use them a lot, sometimes I use them a little, but there's something about writing stuff down for me that drives it in. And there are notes on all sorts of things. Each notebook eventually gets a name. This was a book that I was reading up to recently, the Rouge et Noir. It's a well-known French novel that many high school children have to read. There's even, funnily enough, so these eventually I will write in page numbers in the book, and I progressively give the book an index. And so I can see here that we have a history of tequila on page 4, and on page 5A, we have the impact of research papers. And I don't remember what I wrote there, but oh, that's interesting. So this is something that I saw in The Economist that I pulled out. And this, I was doing more of this when there was lockdown, and now I'm doing less of it. So this actually, let's see, I kind of hate, I don't like these. This is not the right style for me. I need narrow minds here. But, so I think that, where do I come from? I pull these out from time to time. I don't use them all the time. Sometimes I just have fun. I like looking at art, and then I'll put something like this in. And in a way, there's a reason to it, because the context, I'll read something here, and it's this that will remind me that it's here. And I really do strongly believe, so where am I going with this? Josh Spier is a genius. He's a memory master. You can give him like not 50, maybe 5 packs of cards, and you give him the pack of the cards for like 2 hours. You'll remember randomly shuffled, and you'll remember the order of every single card. And he's written a book on this, and it's Chasing Einstein. I remember the exact name of the book. And he talks about memory palaces. It turns out that our memory is very visual, spatial. And so if we want to try and remember something, one of the best ways to do it is to place it in an imaginary house. And it turns out that the best way to remember the imaginary house and to remember the object that is going to then help you is to make them sort of ludicrous and colorful and memorable. And so that's a sort of mnemonic technique and a technique of memorizing things. So what he does with the order of the cards is he kind of places the cards in the house as he goes up the staircase and into the bedroom and into that's called a memory palace. But in a way, creating visual signals, as I was talking about covers of the book, is in a way the same idea. So these are here, and there is an index to each of them, and there's also a kind of randomness to them. And I think that as a human, I care a lot about my output. And so I also feel, even if it was not useful, feel obligated to write that stuff down. And so the last place I will take you, this is a whole area of study. And this is a German professor who, why is his name not coming up for me? Maybe it will over time. The Zettelkasten system, Luhrmann, if I'm not mistaken. This guy was a sociologist, I believe, the University of Bielefeld. Wasn't a full-time student. He was kind of, I don't remember what he was, and he ended up writing these incredible works, deeply respected as a German academic. And he had this system of 3x5 cards, and he had like 70 or 80,000 of them. And so whenever he read something, he would write up a card, and there's a whole literature on exactly how he did that. But I'm going to, with your permission, take you through that just a little bit. I think that it's important to say, and I'm really happy to share how I try to manage my knowledge, my research, and I feel very lucky and privileged to be able to do it. I think that any system has to evolve. So what you're seeing is multiple systems, and I think that we all need multiple systems because we exist in different worlds. We all exist in digital and physical worlds, for example, so we need something for our physical world and our digital world. I used to spend a lot of time studying, Tiago Forte was a big one, Anna-Laura Kampf was another one. There's a whole bunch of people, personal productivity. But at the end of the day, it comes down to a very, very few simple concepts which one can apply no matter what the technology is. And one is capture. When you have a thought, you have an idea, when you have an insight, they're always fleeting. Capture it as soon as possible. Whatever you have, capture it with. So if it's a notebook, great. If it's an iPhone in Evernote, if it's a photograph, if it's a voice mount, capture it. And then there's the review. So a system of regularly reviewing whatever one's captured, the fleeting thoughts and ideas. And then there's spaced repetition. What system do you have for removing the detritus and pruning and deepening one's knowledge of what one needs to deepen one's knowledge of? And that's what I've just shown you. And that is replicated in the sort of like the Zettelkasten system, which is, and it's just like really, really MIDI here. And I have the same thing at home in Zurich and in London. I sometimes transfer the cards between the two. This is the least well developed, for example, of my knowledge management, if you like. This was just a show that I watched that was hugely in London, and I just liked the show. It was an amazing study of how muscle works in Moscow. That will eventually get stuck into a notebook, one of those moleskin notebooks. But so, you know, this was actually written for me by somebody else. So this was a summary of Mikhail Khodorkovsky's book, How to Slay a Dragon. And Mikhail Khodorkovsky was put into prison by Putin. He was one of Russia's greatest oligarchs. And he was denuded of his wealth. And How to Slay a Dragon is how to slay the system that is currently in Russia. It was an interesting book, and I wanted to make notes on it. And again, this is a system of spaced repetition, so maybe if I was to come back to this and find this valuable, I'd remake the card, or I wouldn't remake the card, but I wrote it down once. So, you know, study it, teach it, study it, revise it, teach it, you know, is an idea in medicine. So, you know, I have the first draft of my understanding, but here's a company called Berenson Group, where what I did was, and I've done this for a number of companies, kind of an interesting way to, I just like, and this is not particularly well written, you know, it's kind of scribbled even for me, but and this would have been done in 2023. What were their revenues broken down, total revenues, Spirits revenues, consolidated profit, and what I've written here is CapEx not explained, approximately 10 million. So I've written down a couple of questions, and yeah, I reminded of this, and I'm like, what's interesting is it was rejected for the portfolio for good reason, in my opinion, but lovely people. I had a conversation with them. So do you see how that literally talking to you about it reminds me to talk to you about it? Here's Discover Corporation, the company that owns the Discover card. They just got sold, Capital One Group. And that's an amazing credit card company based in Richmond. I visited them at the same time that I visited Sarab Madan, and was so lucky to have lunch with Tom Gaynor. And again, here are some, you know, it's like, okay, I've read the annual report. What I'm going to do, throw the annual report away. I want to remember that the company exists. And this is a company that, in a way, I don't know if I regret not buying it. I would have made a lot of money, and I understood the credit card business. But this was a kind of like third or fourth player in the credit card business. It turned out that the third or fourth player also did extraordinarily well. They're no longer publicly traded. But I just wrote down key numbers to remind myself that they exist. Here's Netflix. So I've got one for each company. As you saw, I did one for a book the other day. Some of these are just like sort of notes that I scribbled down, you know. And I was doing more of this. I haven't been doing this a lot recently, and that's interesting to me. So I think that these systems change, and I don't think that that's terrible. I had an intern make some for me. I didn't like it when he made them. I think you have to make them yourself. And I haven't been using this much, but that's okay. You know, I don't know when I'll come back to it. It's still a product of my mind, and it's kind of the story of my experimentation, if you like, with the Zettelkasten system. And you know, various different ways of filing these cards, if you like. I think if I was an academic researcher, I might use these differently, if you like. So, but the whole point about this is the serendipitous aspect of going through these things. And I think that here's something on Sir John Hicks, and you've got the same idea. How that's interesting. Why is that sticking out to me like now? Is there a reason for it, or is it just random? And here's something building a storyboard. So here's a list of friends of a friend of mine in India. No companies that we talked to discuss together. But part of the idea here is capture it, put it down. Don't create the stress in your brain of having to remember. It's captured, it's there. When the moment is right, I will come to it. Just make sure that I review it on a regular basis, and then you will get to it. And that's kind of like what this whole office is about.
It's also quite interesting to see this, how you're all playing this out, because from a conscious and subconscious mind, it sounds like in your own way, you're creating what Charlie Munger has called the Lollapalooza effect, where your office, the way you're taking notes, it's like you're creating your own, I think it's called the Lollapalooza effect.
Lollapalooza for me is multiple psychological factors building to create a sort of like unusual outcome or extraordinary outcome. I can say that, so one, maybe I can call it, I don't know if it's a downside, but it's something that I need to manage, is that I'm interested in many, many things. So there's a whole bunch of material there that is very, very thoroughly unrelated to investing. I mean, I happen to be interested in the what's going on in Israel right now. And so this is an amazing report written by the Secretary of State for the Colonies to the Parliament. I don't know who was the actual author of it, but I started reading this online. I was like, my God, this is really, really well written. This is giving me a history of the region like I've never read before. And so when this gets mixed up into that, and I really want to read this, it can kind of slow me down on my investment research, and it can increase the capacity for distraction, if you like. And so actually that it gives me a segue to be able to say, and because of that, I created a couple of other sections in this room. So if we look down here, so we have newspapers, and these are periodicals that are just fun periodicals that I like to read, that I usually take on airplanes with me. And The Economist is general reading. This is a publication for the Jewish community of Switzerland. Bilanz magazine is kind of like Bild-Zeitung or the Sun newspaper for Swiss business. And so this is kind of like, I realized that as I was adding those to the kind of like sometime soon now, it was kind of distracting me because I kept coming across sort of light reading. And so I kind of separated out light reading. I'll take the light reading with me when I go on a train ride, or when I go on if I go on a flight. And then what also happened to me is that, so, I'll come across something like the economics of electricity that's related to my investment in IEX. And I say I want to read it later. And I realized that there's kind of elements of IEX in all of the piles. And so I realized that what I need to do is collect up specific topics. And so if you look at those black folders over there, the specific topic I'm looking across there, there's coal, for example. And so rather than putting it into then these piles, I'll go, actually, I want to put it all together and read about it when I'm doing coal. So I'll pull out the coal folder or another folder. So we've talked about how this is my kind of extended inbox. And now we can do a nice segue to something that's come up in an article that I wrote called How to Market If You Hate Humanity. And I completely switched over the way I was running my business when I came to Zurich, in that when I was in New York, I was running around taking meetings with all sorts of people. And I'm not an extrovert, even though it may seem like I am. It's not like I don't like interacting with humanity, I do, but my social battery runs down quickly. And I didn't want to compete with the New York style of glad-handing, running around, taking people for lunch. And as I've written, I was really envious of Monish Pabrai, who was writing holiday cards to people on an airplane in India. And so this is slightly back-ended, but when you send a lot of... So what I realized was, and we're going to go to the mailroom in a second, which is kind of a key part of my small business here, is a handwritten note is a far, far better way to engage with somebody than just about anything else for all sorts of reasons. And I'll just give a few right now. Handwritten note is tactile. So what's the key about this? This is a head cut done by a famous artist of me, Wall Street Journal style, so my name. But it could be a piece of hotel stationery if one likes. And I have plenty of these around at all times. And, you know, we talked earlier about how what I might do with Anna Critti, so I might be over on the other side writing an email to her, but I might also just write a handwritten note to her. Dear Anna, I thought you wrote an incredible book, and I really appreciated it. I learned a lot about the electricity industry. Bam. And now she's getting a note. So I sit here and I spend quite a lot of time writing handwritten notes to all sorts of people. I also send birthday cards to all sorts of people. So I'm now in this incredible place where this is kind of set up as a system. So I'll be sending out, you know, making sure that it's somebody that doesn't mind me mentioning their name. Here's Claudia Marcelloni, who ran TEDx Sound. She'll get a holiday card from me. I've attended her TEDx. There's 2 or 3 times a year when you have the right to write to somebody uninvited. One is a birthday, and one is Christmas, end of year, and one might be a major religious or other festival. And so those are auspicious moments because I can kind of wish them. I wouldn't wish Warren Buffett a happy birthday. I think that's intrusive on his life. But I'm okay to send him a holiday card once a year. And that's an opportunity to engage with him. I have to make it. So what's the benefit of the handwritten note? You know, why am I not going to call up Warren Buffett and try to get through his assistant and say, I'd like to wish Warren a happy birthday? Because he doesn't have the time for me. He's busy. The thing about the handwritten note is that he can read it when he's ready to read it, which is great. So, you know, there's a whole system here for, you know, there are all sorts of notes that I want to write, have to write, will write. And when I get to them, I get to them. And now they're organized in this way. So every incoming letter, unless it's spam mail, will get a handwritten response from me. And I'll write a handwritten response. And so, you know, this is from Dan Voskil, who did an internship with me. Some of these cards, these Zettelkasten cards were written by him. And various people that I will write to. So I spend time also here, in addition to reading, writing. But let's go to the mailroom now. And actually, very briefly, I'll take you through one work of art. I acquired really just 1 or 2 works of art here. Well, let's go into the mailroom. And I was really impressed with Monish Pabrai's mailroom. I found it, so this is, it's funny. So a joke that I tell people is that, you know, some people think I run an investment firm. Actually, I run a goodwill shop. And the goodwill happens through sending personal handwritten notes. And so it starts with what we saw over there. But now I've been doing it for about 10 or 15 years, I guess. And you just cannot believe the power of the compounding that happens. And so this is, what is this system of writing handwritten notes? And it's a handwritten note with a thought. And the thought is often probably too briefly expressed, but when a person receives a handwritten note or a birthday card or a condolence card, it says, I care about you. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And in a way, you can kind of fake it a little bit. I found, as I wrote in my book, that I started off writing these notes, not really caring. And then I ended up finding out that I cared. And so the act of writing the note creates a deeper relationship. And the question is, to what degree can you scale up those relationships and have more of them, not less of them? And this is something that anybody can do. So if I'm in a hotel room and I start off doing this, I'd buy postcards and write to people that I thought of. And then you can continue with the handwritten notes. And it doesn't have to be on your own note paper. It's the sentiment that counts. And what really blew me away is I was visiting somebody's office and they'd kept my handwritten note. I thought, why the hell did you keep that? So it's special. Handwritten note costs nothing. So there's a system here of at the end of every day, I tend to come in here and find a few things to send out. And so we have a whole selection of things that I can send out to them, from birthday cards to condolence cards to holiday cards that I'll send people through the year if I want to see them a photograph of my family. And then, for what it's worth, the printer sits here. As you can see, I like reading physical paper, and this is a fantastic printer, and I love having the printer here. But some of this stuff I don't touch, but there are various different kinds of envelopes. Obviously, there's my annual report. We'll only send the annual report to people we're allowed to send it to if they're interested to receive it. But that's not the most important thing. The more valuable stuff for me here is, at Value X BRK this year, we had Luca Delana, and he wrote this book, Winning Long-Term Games. Guess what? I'm all about trying to win long-term games. And so many people, including somebody who's helped me very much with my YouTube channel, called Jeremy Stickney. He's an amazing guy. He's a member of our Value X community who is learning how to play long-term games and already plays some pretty good long-term games. So I loved his book, and I blurbed it, and then he actually put my name on the cover, which was really nice of him. It was lovely of him. But, I'm sending this out to, for example, CEOs of the businesses that we own, sending out to all sorts of people. And I really do believe that, if the person's name comes up for me, send them the book. Allow serendipity. Create as many opportunities as you can for serendipity to happen. And as you can see, I'm trying to create as many opportunities as possible. There are books that get recycled. So books, either I've got too many copies of them, or I've read it and I don't want it, or I, by mistake, ordered too many copies, all sorts of reasons why. And so I try to send these books out to people who would enjoy it, relevant. This is a book under somebody's pseudonym. He actually tutored my children. And so I had some copies of the book. At the right moment, I'll send it out to somebody. And there's copies, obviously, of my book in various different languages, which is kind of fun. And, every now and then I can't believe, is this fun? I appeared on the cover of this magazine. Can you believe that? It's crazy. But this happens to be in Estonian, so it's not a particularly large circulation. It's not quite Forbes in the United States or anything. But so if I meet somebody Estonian, I'll send this to them, I send something to, so I'm doing that. I enjoy doing it. I'm doing it constantly. I'm creating that extra little bit of possibility for something to happen as a result of, and what I've learned, so there's in the Psychology of Influence book, Cialdini talks about a reciprocation that happened 20 years after, 30 years after the original act of kindness. So deep investment into the long future. And I live in fear that there are things that I could do today to make a better future that I'll only realize in 10 years' time. And in a sense, any success I have now, it's because I started doing this kind of investment 15 years ago. And so much of the knowledge that I've gained is through relationships that came to me through the system that's going on here, which is engaging with people and engaging with them in an easy way that is memorable for them. And as you saw, that's what Warren Buffett is doing with his holiday cards. So there's so many different ways to do it, and each one becomes personal to each individual. So my book, we have the principles that appear in the front of my annual report. That could be the subject of a whole, well, each principle could be the subject of a whole podcast. This is just another way to, so various different kinds of, and then, when I see a book that I really like, either by a friend, by somebody I admire, or maybe one of our investors, I already talked about the Wave Forker book, then I'll buy multiple copies and potentially send it out to people. And we talked about how when you send a book, now I'm associated with that book. And by associating myself with that book, I create the possibility for conversation. I also increase the probability that that person will read the book, or they'll read the book with me in mind. So there's powerful things going on there when you send a physical copy of the book. But at the end of some weeks, I haven't been here for a while, this table will be full. So I'll be looking at somebody, or we talked about that electricity book. and I'll have written something to her, and then I'll come here and I'll say, oh, I'll send her a copy of my book. So I'll send her a copy of my book. This stuff is just happening repeatedly all the time. So what I'm going to do now, with your permission, is to take you into the room where work actually gets done. I'm supposed to be doing thinking and investment decision and relationship building. And now you'll see where the actual work gets done, which is an incredible team. And they've said it's okay to video them. So if you want to come through here, and so this is an office in full swing. I'm not going to introduce everyone, but unless somebody asks me to introduce them. What's fascinating for me is that although we have plenty of spare offices, everybody wants to be in here. Why is that? Because we have an incredible team and everybody learns from each other, and sometimes I want to be in here. And I have an argument with my wonderful, incredible chef de whatever we want to call it, because she only wants one of these and I want them on all the walls. And so around 5 p.m. every afternoon, I start having interior decoration conversations. And I'm going to do an inside joke here just for fun, which is that I know you're looking at black desks over here, but they're actually white. And that's an inside joke that if you email somebody, Jeremy Stickney probably will tell you the inside joke. But then as you can see, I'm in love with USN. And this is a Swiss office. So there's all sorts of things about this that are Swiss, that speak Swissness. But now I'm going to take you to the most important place, which is, it's not the most important place, but one of my favorite places, which is the kitchen. And I'll talk to you about the kitchen. If you walk through, I'll follow you. And why do I have to take you to the kitchen? Because the kitchen is where I have my beloved coffee machine. And this is where all the action is. And coffee is where it's at. But this is a wonderful area, and we have wonderful conversations in here. We have lunch pretty much every day here. I mean, I have multiple coffees, and it's great. And this is an important part of our work environment. And I'll just show you one thing on the way out. I'm going to go this way. I like figurative art, and this is abstract art. And this is an Israeli artist called Yaakov Agan, who's all over the Tel Aviv Museum. It's the only special work of art that I've bought. And it's so funny because I agreed to host something for the State of Israel on Israel's 70th birthday. An art dealer who was a friend deals in Agam's work, so he brought Agam's work here. And what's so fascinating about this is that it's this idea that, if you look at this piece of work from different angles, you see a different thing. And if anybody's watched the Akira Kurosawa movie Rashomon, it's called the Rashomon effect maybe, and a story told from a different perspective is, different people see different things, and different people may see very, very different things. So I might have somebody looking from the other side of this work, and they'll see one thing and I'll see another thing, and that's kind of a metaphor for so much that is life. There's a metaphor for so much that is looking at investments and other things, and I kind of enjoy that this is a constant reminder that what I see is not what you see. And your perspective might be different to mine. So in a way, that's kind of what motivated me to want to own this, even though at the time I bought it on company expenses, as my CFO there will say, that's the last time we're buying this on, not the fund that I manage, just expenses, but the company that manages the fund. I would have in the future bought it in my own capacity, but it's owned by the management company. And where I'd like to take you now is I can take you briefly to the conference room, and I will take you to the first office that I occupied here. We'll start with the conference room. And an interesting question at conference room is, what is the color of the table? And when I came here, it was a sort of like very cold, dark, not metal, but this kind of stone table. And a long time ago, I had a dream that I told a psychotherapist friend that I had at the time about that dream. And I was shouting with my family around a wooden table. What he told me was that wood signifies safety. And this is a warm table, which is kind of fun. But this is where we have meetings. We're not in here as often as we like. I really feel so extraordinarily privileged to be in this, to be able to work in such a beautiful room And we're next to downtown Zurich. People who know Zurich, we're in Bellevue over here. And so we just had a lunch here. So it was a kind of a brown bag lunch. So you know what's going on there. I'm not sure that there's an enormous amount more to tell about this conference room. We store some things here, you know, when we have visitors. So if we talk about the you know, reciprocation effect, and as you saw, I love Moleskine notebooks, so we often give out a Moleskine notebook, which is kind of says all sorts of things. Not only do I like taking notes, but others should take physical notes as well. And oh, I just see that I left my Diet Coke here, so why don't I take that with me? Not bad. And yeah, by the way, this is the furniture is by a company called Vitra. It's a German company. They make extraordinary furniture. It's kind of part of the design for me is that it's a solid, stable, neutral, disappears for me, and is reliable. I know what I'm getting. And so that's important for me. And I only select furniture from 2 or 3 brands, so that's where I want it to be. So why don't we go to the original office that I occupied. And we're going to walk down this corridor here. So the original office that I occupied there's a few things in here, so it's used a little bit as a storage room, but I really used to love this room, except that it used to get really hot in summertime. But this is where I used to work. Not the same arrangement here, but who wouldn't want to work in a wood-paneled room? It's just freaking beautiful, I guess. And we can continue here to some more books from the library. This part here has got quite a few fiction books. So as we pass from the conference room, there's a few more things that I'm really proud and happy to show, or I think are interesting. Is that at some point I realized that I'm very sensitive to noise, and in my office, we didn't go into it, we have sound treatment to reduce the echo. I found that echo was frustrating for me. I'm hugely sensitive. So this looks like an artwork. I don't really think much of it. I don't really care. But it's actually to reduce echo in the corridor and to muffle the sound. And the sound doesn't have to be too muffled, but I appreciate that environment is important to me. Last place I want to take you is outside to just give a sense of where we are. And so we're here in the 8001 area code, which is downtown Zurich. I mean, for those who know Zurich, we're not in the Bahnhofstrasse. We're on the other side of the Limmat River, but it's still very, very close to the center. And as you can see, there's an enormous amount of greenery here, and it's really just lovely to be in such an environment. And you can see this beautiful Jugendstil villa that we're in, and I've already talked about how this is owned by a family, and there's something really special, and there's a social structure to the inner city of Zurich that gives it a grounded feel that is one of the problems with rapacious inheritance taxes, is that they destroy social structures, especially in places where real estate values have gone up, and as a result people cannot pay the inheritance tax and are forced to sell. Past the trees there is Zurich's second most important station, Stadelhofen station, and you don't even see it, but it's so neatly built in. There's a tunnel that goes under this lawn here, and the people who know this area will know that we're steps away to train connections to 15 minutes, 2 trains every hour to the airport, and 25 minutes with 1 stop. You've got connections to the whole of Switzerland, and the lake is literally a 3 or 4 minute walk from here. And out on the mountains that I'm looking out on right now is the Uetliberg mountain, which is the local Zurich mountain. But this is an extraordinary environment to be able to work in, and I feel extraordinarily lucky to be able to work in this environment. I hope that the landlord decides to keep me here for an extremely long time. Yeah, and one of Zurich's well-known high schools is here. Hohe Promenade is a gymnasium, a high school, state-funded. Something that I keep telling people in London is that the best buildings in the city here in Zurich will never be sold to some real estate developer. They're owned by the city. The university has some of the best buildings and locations in the city. The high schools do. Why? Because they're public property. The Swiss, we Swiss I can now say, because I've become Swiss, would never think about giving up ownership of that property to some developer or some insurance company or some investor. It's owned by us, the tax-paying public, and there's something really, really special about that. I get very upset in London when I see that the City Hall, the Town Hall of London, has been sold and has become some hotel, and the civil servants have to work in some awful place in Elephant and Castle, and I don't think that's right. And if you don't respect the local population, there's something wrong here. So there are so many ways that Switzerland is on very solid founding, social solid founding, if you like, and it's a number of things that have come together really, really well. Yeah, and I would say that the path to my car is normally parked behind that tree. I don't know what the name of the tree is, willow maybe, because all the leaves are falling down. So when my path to my car is to walk out and to walk up these steps, and I feel again so privileged that I get to walk through nature. The Japanese talk about taking a forest bath, and I don't need to. I get to do it every day. This is a forest bath just here, so it's been a great pleasure to have you here. I hope that this is helpful and instructive. I think it's helpful for me to talk through. It's well known that the way you learn the right things well is you talk them through, so in a way I'm talking this through, and that helps me as well. I think that the key is not to get bogged down in the detail, not to get bogged down in the technology. I think that what I've learned from doing this talk is that the capture habit, spaced repetition, create reminders in the physical world, in the physical environment of what we're trying to aim for, whether that's the statue or the bust of Charlie Munger, whether it's the letters, but whether it's also that sometime now, soon, system of sending stuff to my future self, and creating the opportunities for serendipity through the mailroom, super important. And something that I've learned, I mean, I spend a lot of time in my book talking about structuring the physical environment, and the physical environment really is quite spectacular, no question about that. But I've really learned since then that it's not the physical environment, although that helps a lot, it's who's in your life. And the people in your life will make the biggest difference. And so if you're not in such a beautiful environment, that's okay. And I used to think that you can't be a great investor in New York City. Of course you can. And but the people in New York City maybe have to work just a little bit harder to create the right environment in terms of the people in your life. And if I go back to the mailroom and the handwritten notes, the way I believe you can create that extra special environment of people is through the act of quietly strengthening the relationships with the people that are worth strengthening relationships with, creating serendipity with people that one would like to have a relationship with. You know, you don't have to ever pick up the phone and tell somebody, I don't have to pick up the phone and tell somebody I don't want them in my life, but I can maybe take an extra few days before I respond to them. So that kind of subtle structuring of relationships. So when you see the mailroom, think of it as an opportunity to, on a daily basis, subtly structure the relationships in one's life and rearrange and strengthen some bonds, weaken some other bonds, bring a few people closer. That's really the key, and everything that I've learned really has been from the people. Having said that, especially with ADD, I hope that the way I've structured the environment is interesting. And what I'd say is, you know, if you watch this video and you see I'm doing something wrong, please let me know. I'm learning, and as you saw that some of the systems, I mean, in a way, the Zettelkasten system is not something I've been using as much recently. If you have ideas, questions, then I'll do my best to respond. But thanks for coming.